Hey people, I welcome you all to Caroline's Online Academy. So, through this series of videos, we are actually trying to solve the previous year board examination questions that have been asked by the board as a sample paper question or a board examination question, main board examination question, or a compartment question from the chapter Accounting for Share Capital. And previously, we had solved questions, we had classified the questions into different types. They ask one more question. They ask preparation of schedule of share capital according to the Companies Act 2013. And then they ask questions in which you only have to pass journal entries for forfeiture and reissue. Apart from that, they also ask a 8 mark question or a 6 mark question. Nowadays, there is no 8 mark question. As for, for the past 3 years, we don't have 8 mark questions in the question paper. But before that, we had 8 mark questions, and now it's being asked as a 6 mark question. A question in which you will have to account for pro rata, forfeiture, and reissue. That is a problem in which a pro rata allotment would have been made, and you'll have to start from receiving application money till forfeiting and reissuing the shares of some defaulter who is not paid. Okay, so we're going to be looking at questions like that. I've taken questions from the previous year too, so there might be some 8 mark questions. You might wonder if that is relevant now. It is very much relevant. Even if they don't ask all the adjustments in one question as an 8 mark question, few of these adjustments will be asked, put together and asked as a 6 mark question. They will remove probably one or two adjustments in this question and ask as a 6 mark question. So the idea is to understand the concept and be able to solve any question with any of these concepts involved. And therefore, I think this is very much relevant. When we read the question, I've taken this question from Compartment 2018 question paper. It was asked as an 8 mark question. It had an internal choice with another question. So the students could have chosen to do this one or that one. This I thought was an easy one. Let's look at it. X Ltd invited applications for issuing 5 lakh equity shares of rupees 10 each at par. The amount per share was payable as follows. On application, rupees 1 per share. On allotment, 2 per share. On first call, 3 per share. On second and final call, the remaining amount. Applications for 8 lakh shares were received. Applications for 1 lakh shares were rejected, and pro rata allotment was made to the remaining applicants. Excess application money received with application was adjusted towards sums due on allotment. All calls were made. Ashok, a shareholder holding 5,000 shares, failed to pay the allotment money and the call money. Mohan, a shareholder who had applied for 7,000 shares, failed to pay the first and second and final call. Shares of Ashok and Mohan were forfeited after the second and final call. Of the forfeited shares, 8,000 shares were reissued at rupees 12 as fully paid. The reissued shares included all the forfeited shares of Ashok. So that's our question. So the company is inviting application for a certain number of shares. It has received more than what it is invited, and it rejects certain applications and makes allotment at a proportionate rate to the remaining application. That is, it makes pro rata allotment on the remaining applications. Pro rata allotment of the available shares on the remaining applications. And we have two people who didn't pay. For instance, in this case, there is Ashok who's holding 5,000 shares. 5,000 shares. So they're actually telling how many shares Ashok is holding. Okay. They have given us the number of shares that Ashok has been allotted. I'll tell you why this is relevant. When we are solving the problem, you'll understand why it is important for us to analyze if the number of shares allotted has been given or the number of shares applied by the shareholders. So here for Ashok, they've given the number of shares allotted, which is 5,000 shares, and he failed to pay the allotment money and the call money. And there is another shareholder, Mohan, who had applied for 7,000 shares. They've not given the number of shares that is being held by Mohan. Now, in a pro rata allotment problem, the number of shares applied for and the number of shares allotted are not going to be same because we are making pro rata allotment. Am I right? So in computing call scenarios, we actually need the number of shares allotted to the shareholder, but they have not given the number of shares allotted to Mohan. They've only given the number of shares applied by Mohan. So that is also another thing that we have to work on. And then both their shares are being forfeited after the second and final call, because it says that in this line, if you see, it says that the second and final call has been made. As Mohan has not paid the second and final call, it's obvious that second and final call has been made, because only then we can come to a conclusion that Mohan has not paid. Am I right? So only if it is called, he cannot pay. So yeah, so that's it. So now we're gonna have to account for this. Understood? In the beginning stages, I'm not going to do the working note separately and then do all the journal entries together. I'll do the working note whenever we need to do it as per the journal entries. Understood or not? That is, I'll just start doing the journal entries without preparing the working note in the beginning itself, and I'll do it whenever it is required. Over a period of time, when you practice more and more problems, you'll know how much space is required for the problem, and so you will leave that much space for the journal entry, and you can do the working note below the problem in the examination. So for now, let's start with the first transaction. The first transaction in these kinds of questions is actually receiving the application money. So for receiving application money, the journal entry is bank account debit to equity share application account to equity share application account, and that is how much, my dear children, in this case. The company has received 8 lakh applications, and what is the application money per share? It was 1 per share. So 8 lakh into 1, 8 lakh rupees. All right. You please write the proper narration. I'm just writing something now. Application money to receive. If you want sentence, do you write proper narration in the exam? You should know. Or you write like me. Okay, and so the next journal entry will be to allot shares. Okay, so 3 things have happened here. What all has happened? We have allotted shares to some applicants. We've rejected some applications, so we'll have to refund that money. And as it is a pro rata allotment, some excess application money would have been received by us. That we'll have to adjust towards the sums due on allotment as given in the question. See, excess money received with applications was adjusted towards the sums due on allotment. Right. So if you don't understand what excess application money is, why it is being adjusted towards allotment and further calls and all, you can go ahead and watch the concept videos. I'll give the link to the concept video below this in the description of this video, and you can go and watch the concept video, understand those terms, and then come back and watch this. It'll be easier for you. But if you have already been taught in class on what excess application money is and what pro rata allotment is and why it is adjusted towards allotment, you can go ahead and continue with this. Yeah, so first thing, the second entry when you're allotting the shares, always and every time, debit equity share application with the full amount that you credited in the previous entry. Understood? Every single thing that you write correctly will have marks, my dear children, and therefore I want you to remember to not give up when you see such a big whatever you can. So everything you follow every single step carefully, it might fetch you 3 marks in the end out of the 6 marks. Or you might end up solving the full 6 mark itself. It is very easy to solve this question completely. It's not difficult at all. Just pay attention. Okay. Yeah, so equity share application will be credited with the full amount, and whatever number of shares allotted into the application money receivable per share will be taken to equity share capital, because we receive certain amount of money as application money, and now we have allotted shares to them. So the moment we allot shares to them, they become the shareholders of the company, and whatever money we received as application money from them is now share capital of the company. Am I right? So it will be credited to share capital account. So this is what number of shares allotted into application money per share. Understood or not, my dear children? And then you rejected certain applications. Am I right? So that we'll have to refund. So to bank account, how many applications were rejected? We rejected 1 lakh applications. Am I right? So 1 lakh applications are rejected. So the money has to be refunded to those people. So 1 lakh into 1 rupee was the amount received per application from them. So that has been done. And whatever excess application money is left even after that has to be taken to share allotment. How much is left, my dear children? You received 8 lakh in total. Out of that, 5 lakh has been taken to share capital, 1 lakh has been refunded. So the remaining 2 lakh is being taken to share allotment account to be adjusted against the further calls that they're going to make. Shares allotted. Alright. So what is the next transaction? The next transaction is to make allotment money due. Remember this, my dear children. Whenever you make allotment money due, you always make it due for the entire amount on the shares allotted. Okay, so we have allotted 5 lakh shares, and I'll show you how to compute the amount. So we'll debit share allotment account to equity share capital will be credited because making it due. Share allotment money made due. Understood or not, my dear children? So what do I mean by the entire amount? You've allotted 5 lakh shares, right? And on allotment, you receive 2 rupees per, you've decided to receive 2 rupees per share. Am I right? So on 5 lakh shares, you'll have to receive 5 lakh into 2, 10 lakh rupees. So you might wonder, or you might have a query that, we already credited share allotment account with 2 lakh rupees in the second entry. So should I still make the entire 10 lakh due? If you ask me, the answer is yes. You got to make the entire 10 lakh due, even if you have some excess application money that you've already adjusted towards allotment in the second journal entry when you allotted shares. Even if you have done that, you have to make the entire amount due. Always make the entire amount due. Okay. And now it's time to pass the fourth journal entry. But there is a small problem in the fourth journal entry. The thing is, one of the shareholders, the fourth journal entry is basically receiving allotment money. And the problem is one of the shareholders has not paid allotment money. So obviously calls in arrears account has to be debited because it's money receivable from him. He is not yet paid. So in order to make sure, sorry guys, in order to make sure, in order to keep track of the fact that he is not paid even after the amount having got due, we transfer that amount to calls in arrears account. So we'll have to debit calls in arrears account and share allotment account will be credited. Understood? So allotment money received. You please write the full narration, okay, as usual. Now, share allotment account will be credited with what amount? The 10 lakhs that you made due minus the 2 lakh you've already credited to share allotment account in the second journal. Now we need to receive only 8 lakh, right? We made 10 lakh due, but there is already excess application money of 2 lakh. So you set that off, and the remaining only you got to credit now to share allotment. Understood or not, my dear children? And then we'll have to find out the amount of money received and the calls in arrears. Now, it would be a very straightforward problem if there was no excess application money. If there was no excess application money, all that we have to do is, find out the number of shares that is being held by the person who is defaulting. In this case, it is 5,000 shares. And the allotment money per share is 2 rupees per share. So that is what had been receivable from him. So 5,000 into 2 is 10,000, the call scenario. So you would have done that directly. But as it is a pro rata problem, and as it is a pro rata problem with some with some excess application money that has been adjusted towards this particular call in which calls and arrays has happened, we'll have to do a working note to ascertain the amount of calls and arrays. You'll understand why we are doing it once we are done with it. So you have serial number and particulars. This is working note for computation of calls and arrays. Computation of calls in arrears. Amount. The first thing in the working note is to ascertain the excess application money per share that is available to be set off against allotment. Excess application money per share that is available to be set off against a call in which there is arrears. In this case, the call being allotment. The total excess application money is 2 lakh, my dear children. And this 2 lakh is available for how many shareholders? Shares, how many shares? 5 lakh shares. The total number of shares that you allotted. Okay. The 2 lakh is the total amount available for 5 lakh shares. So for one share, how much is available? 2 lakh divided by 5 lakh, which happens to be 0.40. Understood? Now, the second thing would be to understand how much we have made due on allotment. Allotment money made due per share. What is the total allotment money that we made due per share? It's 2 rupees. It's there, given in the question. And hence, the amount receivable, allotment money receivable from each shareholder would be the amount that we made due minus the excess application money that they've already paid along with the excess application that we need. Understood? Or the excess application money available per share. And therefore, it will be 2 minus 0.4, which is 1.6. So this is the amount that was supposed to have been received from every shareholder and from Mohan also. So total calls in arrears would be what? The number of shares that Ashok or Mohan, who is it? Ashok. Ashok is shareholder 5,000 shares, failed to pay the allotment, right? The total shares held by Ashok 5,000 multiplied by the amount that he's supposed to have paid, which is only 1.6 and not 2 rupees. And it's not 2 rupees because of the excess application money that was available because of the pro rata allotment that was made. So the total calls in arrears in this case is 8,000. So what do we do here? We write 8,000 in calls in arrears and every other shareholder is paid and therefore that will be 8 lakh minus 8,000, 7 lakh minus. Understood or not, my dear children? Now this working out you cannot do in between the problem, you'll have to do after the problem. As I told you, now I'm doing it as and when it is required, as and when the journal entry requires us to do the working note. But in the examination, after you have a complete understanding of when you have to do the working note and stuff, you can do it, you can leave as much the amount of space that is required for the journal entries and do the working note at the end, whenever it is required. Okay, so this working note is done. And the next thing that we got to do is make allotment money due. Sorry, first call money due. So that will be equity share first call account debit to equity share capital account. How much is the first call amount, my dear children, per share? It is 3 rupees per share. Am I right? So 3 rupees into 5 lakh shares is 3 into 5 lakh is 15 lakh. So that will be 15 lakh, my dear children. And now we got to receive the first call money, but there is a problem there as well. Ashok has already not paid allotment, so obviously he will not have paid first call money. Apart from Ashok, there is another shareholder called Mohan also did not pay the first call money. So we'll have to do the working work for Mohan also. So there will be calls in arrears. That is something that we know for sure. So we'll just write the journal entry first and then fill in the amounts. And the bank account will be debited because we are receiving first call money. As some shareholders have defaulted, there will be calls in arrears and that is also debited. And equity share first call will be credited. Now, what do we know? Every time we do the receipt entry, the first thing that we got to do is credit the entire amount that we made due. So that is 15 lakh. That has been done. And now we got to compute the calls in arrears. There is no excess application money for first call. So computation of calls in arrears is actually very simple. For Ashok, the calls in arrears would be the number of shares held by him, which is 5,000 into the first call amount that is being made due. So for Ashok, it is 5,000 into 3. And for Mohan also has not paid, right? So it will be the number of shares held by him into 3. But unfortunately, we don't have the number of shares held by him. Am I right or not, my dear children? Why don't we have that? Because the question only gives us the number of applications made by Mohan. You see, Mohan, a shareholder who would apply for 7,000 shares, failed to pay the first, second, and final call. Understood or not? We go to first compute the number of shares held by Mohan. Okay. So they given that the Mohan has applied for uh, 7,000 shares. Am I right? So what we do, whatever they've given, we multiply and write it. Understood? And we draw a division symbol like this. And Mohan has applied for 7,000 shares, right? So 7,000 is the total number of 7,000 is the application made by him. If applications have been given, write the total number of applications received, on which prorate allotment has been made in the bottom. The company totally received 8 lakh. Am I right? Out of that, 1 lakh shares were rejected. So for remaining 7 lakh shares, only prorate allotment was made. So write that in the denominator. What do we have to find? We need to find the total number of shares of Mohan, right? So that you write the total number of shares allotted to all shareholders in the numerator in order to find the total number of shares allotted to Mohan. So if the total applications of Mohan has been given, you multiply and write that. If applications have been given, write the total number of applications on which prorate allotment was made in the denominator. And you need to find the total number of shares allotted to Mohan, right? Then you write the total number of shares on which was allotted on pro rata basis in the numerator. In this case, it is 7 lakh, 8 lakh application minus 1 lakh was rejected. The remaining 7 lakh applications were only given shares on pro rata basis, and only 5 lakh shares were allotted. So if you solve this, what do you get? 5,000 shares. So Mohan had been allotted 5,000 shares. Understood or not, my dear children? Mohan had been allotted 5,000 shares. So Mohan has 5,000 shares and 3 rupees is the money receivable per share. And there is no excess application money, and therefore Mohan's calls in arrears will be 5,000 into 3. So the total calls in arrears in this case is, my dear children, 5,000 plus 5,000 into 3, which is 30,000. And therefore the amount received will be 14 lakh 70,000. Sorry. 14 lakh 70,000. Alright, so after this, we also make the second call due, and we have to receive the second call also. Let's go ahead and do that. You have to make it for on all the 5 lakh shares, right? Because none of the shares have been forfeited yet. Second call amount is what, my dear children? The total issue price is 10. Issue price of all the shares is 10. 10 minus 1 plus 2 plus 3. On application, we receive 1, allotment 2, first call 3. So that is 3 plus 3, 6. So in second and final call, the balance will be 4 rupees. Am I right, my dear children? So 4 rupees is what we got to make due on 5 lakh shares. So the second call making due entry will be equity share second call account debit to equity share capital. And that is 4 into 5 lakh. And then we got to receive second call. What have I told you about second call or receipt entry for any call, my dear children? First, you make the entire amount that you made due, you credit that to the second call account, and then you compute the calls in arrears. 5,000 shares held by Ashok into 4 rupees per share was what he was supposed to pay, which he didn't pay. And for Mohan, it is 5,000 into 3, and 5,000 into 4. Mohan also had 5,000 shares. So it will be 40,000. So the amount received from all the other shareholders will be 20 lakh minus 40,000, which is 19 lakh 60,000. So we made the second call due, and we have received the second call also, and we have also accounted for the calls in arrears. The next thing to do would be to account for forfeiture, because as per the question, we go to forfeit the shares. As you all very well know, in this question, all the shares have been forfeited. Ashok and Mohan shares have been forfeited. So, and there is no premium involved. So the journal entry for forfeiture will be share capital account debit to share forfeiture account to calls and arrears account. Now we have credited equity share capital, right? So when we're debiting, we go to debit equity share capital. All right. So what amount are we supposed to debit? The total number of shares forfeited multiplied by the total number of shares forfeited multiplied by the amount called. I'm going to do it separately for Ashok and Mohan. It's always advisable to do it separately in case there is partial reissue. It will be useful for us if we did it separately. So for Mohan, the total number of shares, for Ashok, the total number of shares forfeited was 5,000 and the entire 10 rupees on the shares have been called up. So it will be 5,010. 5,000 into 10 is 50,000. And amount of calls and arrears is already available with us. The calls and arrears for Ashok was in allotment, it was 8,000 rupees. If you remember, we had computed this. For Ashok, the calls and arrears was 8,000. In allotment, 15,000 in first call and 20,000 in second call. Am I right? The total calls and arrears for Ashok will be 8,000 plus 15,000 in first call and 20,000 in second call. So that amount will be 8,000 plus 35,000, 43,000. So the amount credited to share forfeiture account will be the balancing figure, which is 7,000. Ashok's shares forfeited. Alright, the next thing to do would be, my dear children, forfeit Mohan shares because the shares are also forfeited. The journal entry will remain the same because there is no premium in this for Mohan also. The journal entry is equally share capital account debit to share forfeiture to calls and arrears. So Mohan shares forfeited. The number of shares is again 5,000 for Mohan. So 5,000 into 10, which is 50,000. And the calls and arrears for Mohan is what? He didn't pay the first and second call. Am I right or not, my dear children? So that will be 5,000 shares multiplied by first call amount is 3 plus second call amount is 4. 5,000 into 7. So that is 5,000 into 7, which is 35,000. And therefore, the share forfeiture, which will be the balancing figure, is 50,000 minus 35,000, which is 15,000. So now that we have forfeited both of the shares, all we have to do is reissue and the problem will be over. Let's see if it's a case of partial reissue or not. Oh my God. Yes, it's a case of partial reissue of the forfeited shares. Only 8,000 shares have been reissued. We have forfeited 10,000 shares, but we have only reissued 8,000 shares at rupees 12 per share. So we have reissued the shares at a premium. Understood or not, my dear children? So when you reissue shares at premium, how are you supposed to account for it? First, you debit bank account with the amount of money received by you while reissuing, and then equity share capital account will be credited with the capital portion or the whatever amount you're considering as paid up. And if there is premium, that will be credited to securities premium account. Understood or not? So we reissued 8,000 shares for rupees 12 per share. So that will be 8,000 into 12, the amount received by the company. So 8,000 into 12. And equity share capital, the shares are being considered as fully paid up. Am I right? So fully paid up means face value paid up. So it will be 8,000 into 10, 80,000. And the amount of premium received per share is 8,000 into 2, which is 16,000. All right. So the next thing to do would be to transfer any profit on reissue, if there was any, to capital reserve. Journal entry for that is share forfeiture account debit to capital reserve account. So that we got to compute. Whenever there is a partial reissue, we got to compute the profit on reissue, my dear children. We cannot go ahead and directly, write that by just adding and subtracting the numbers from the journal entries. The working note for that I've already explained to you in many of the previous videos. We'll do that now. Here we have two people, right? So I'll make separate columns for Ashok and Mohan. If you see, my dear children, out of the 8,000 shares that were reissued, the question says that the reissued shares included all the forfeited shares of Ashok. So totally 8,000 shares have been reissued. Out of that, all the forfeited shares of Ashok are there. So how many shares of Ashok should have got reissued? 5,000 shares. Understood or not, my dear children? Because that many shares have been forfeited from Ashok. And when it comes to Mohan, out of the 8,000, 5,000 shares reissued were of Ashok, and therefore remaining 3,000 would be Mohan's shares. Understood, my dear children? The first thing that we're going to find out is profit on forfeiture per share. Profit on forfeiture per share. Now let's go ahead and find out the total profit on forfeiture for Ashok. As you see in the journal entry, we credited share forfeiture account with 7,000 rupees when we forfeited Ashok shares. That is the profit on forfeiture on Ashok shares. So that will be 7,000 divided by the entire number of shares reissued, which is 5,000. So 1.40 is the profit on forfeiture on Ashok shares. And the profit on forfeiture on Mohan shares, how much, my dear children? When we forfeited Mohan shares, we had credited 15,000 to the share forfeiture account. This 15,000 is for 5,000 shares, and therefore it is 15,000 divided by the 5,000 shares that are forfeited, and that will give us a profit on forfeiture per share less loss on reissue per share. There is no loss on reissue in this case, my dear children, because the shares have been reissued at premium. Therefore, there is no loss on reissue. And finally, we have profit on reissue. Profit on reissue is what, my dear children? Profit on forfeiture per share minus loss on reissue. And therefore, it will be 1.40 for Ashok and 3 for Mohan. And the total profit on the reissue of these 8,000 shares is, for Mohan, it is 5,000 shares into 1.4, which is 5,000 into 1.4, 7,000. And for Mohan, it is 3,000 shares of Mohan have been reissued, right? So that number of shares reissued 3,000 into the profit on the reissue per share, which is 3 rupees. So that will be 3,000 into 3, 9,000. And therefore, the total profit on reissue is 16,000. Understood or not, my dear children? So with that, we have come to the end of this video. It's very simple. You just you just account for all the transactions one after the other, and you'll complete the problem in no time. You might think that I've taken a lot of time to solve this problem in the video, so it might take a lot of time to complete in the exam also. Well, it is not true. I'm taking time because I'm explaining the concepts one after the other and doing it, and that is why it is taking so much time. If you did this problem in the examination, it will hardly take hardly take up to 15 to 20 minutes for you to complete the question. If you practice the question well in the at home before you attend the examination. Understood or not, my dear children? I'll meet you again with more problems like this and explaining the solutions to problems like this. Till then, you people have fun and take care.